We're ready to get started. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we are excited to have Secretary of State Steve Simon here, as well as the rest of the panelists that you'll be hearing from throughout the evening. I'd just like to start out by reminding us all what the League of Women Voters mission statement states. The League of Women Voters in Minnesota, or throughout the country, is a nonpartisan organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. We work to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Although we are nonpartisan, we are political and policy driven. Tonight, our goal is to increase awareness of the voting process locally and at the state level. We're going to first hear from Celeste. Where are you, Celeste? I lost you. There you are. She is going to go ahead and review with you the Election Integrity Report.
Thank you so much, Cindy. So I'm just going to share with you very briefly what the post-election review and report is from the League of Women Voters. It was a Minnesota statewide effort. So for starters, by state statute, the counties are required to do the post-election review. And I'll leave more of that up to our experts and panelists today. But the League of Women Voters coordinated an effort to observe the review in 43 of the 87 counties. So I was one of the volunteers that observed the post-election review right here in Becker County. It involved a lot of hard work, is what I can tell you, from local election officials as they hand-counted randomly selected precincts to make sure it matched with the optical scan voting machines. So it was, it involved a lot of due diligence. Like I said, kudos to anyone involved in that process. And statewide, when we observed 43 out of the 87 counties, they got an A++ for the most part in doing that process. There were two administrative errors that we observed, and there's more details in our report that you can find online, but they were rectified through courts and with recounts. So we're very proud, and we can stand up here and say that we have a lot of trust in Minnesota elections, so thank you all. And again, to find the full report, you can go to lwvmn.org/PER. Thank you so much, and I think I get to hand it over to Cindy.
Thank you, Celeste. It is now my privilege to introduce you to Steve Simon, our Secretary of State. Steve has served as our Secretary of State for Minnesota since January of 2015. In his role, he partners with Township, city, and county officials to organize elections on behalf of Minnesota's nearly 4 million eligible voters. I got that right from his website. Okay. Let's welcome Steve Simon, our Secretary of State.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
No. Oh, you got one?
I don't think this one's working. I'll use this one.
Yeah, that's just...
Oh, that's just for you. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
I'm special.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm Steve Simon, Minnesota Secretary of State. It really, truly is an honor to be here with you today. I will tell you one of the reasons I love opportunities like this for all of us to get together and talk about election and democracy and voting issues is this. It took me about 5 minutes into this job to figure out that the worst thing you could do, the worst thing I or anyone in my position could do, is just sit behind a desk in St. Paul all day. That is good for no one. It's not good for the office. It's not good for Minnesota. It's not good for business. We've got a big state. We've got 87 counties. We've got 5.7 million people. It's very important to get out there, to mix it up, to have talks, to exchange ideas, even criticisms. So that's why I'm here. And I really want to thank all of those who had a hand in organizing this event, most particularly the League of Women Voters and the West Central Initiative Foundation. To those who were part of organizing this event, can you raise your hands, please? Let's thank them. So, as many of you know, in our Office of Secretary of State, we have a lot of duties and responsibilities in the Constitution and in state law, but there's no question that the duty of ours that gets the most attention, attracts the most interest, and yes, also attracts the most scrutiny, is elections. We oversee the Minnesota election system. Now, as many of you know, our role is pretty well defined, and we have excellent teammates throughout the state. We all have a role to play, but we all have different duties and responsibilities in making Minnesota's election system what it is. So, for example, as many of you know, but it bears repeating, we don't count votes. That's not something we do at all. We don't lay a finger on anyone's ballot during an election. That all happens at the local level. That happens in townships and cities and counties across Minnesota. So we don't do that. We don't hire or train or pay the election workers, the election judges, as we call them in Minnesota. How many in this room have ever been an election judge, even one time? Wow. Thank you. And bless you for doing that work. We need 30,000 people in Minnesota, 30,000, every general election to do that job, to stand up and step up and be election judges. So we're always looking for people, always looking to cycle through new people who maybe haven't done it before, so spread the word. The election is only a little over 8 months away, the general election. So we don't do those things. So what do we do? Well, way before anyone votes, we do things like make sure that the elections equipment, the tabulating equipment, is up to snuff. We do the certification of that equipment. And way after everyone votes, we do things like post-election audits and reviews. And then in the middle, we do a lot by way of providing legal guidance or policy advice to townships, counties, and cities. We spend a lot of time at the Minnesota legislature trying to tweak and change and perfect our election laws to make sure they serve everyone. And so as a result of all of that, I like to say that I and we are in the democracy business. And in case you haven't noticed, it is quite a time to be in the democracy business these days for a lot of reasons, some good, some not so good. And as I look ahead to the election in the next 8+ months, I have to tell you I have two main goals, as I always do, but maybe more now than ever. Two goals, that's it. Not complicated, and I hope they're common sense things. Ready? Here are my goals for the election in Minnesota. I want to see high turnout and low drama. That's what I want. High turnout, low drama. That's what we want, and that's what Minnesota does best. The high turnout part is almost part of our DNA in Minnesota. It's a real point of pride in the state of Minnesota, and has been for a long, long time, that we are champions when it comes to voting. I hope you know this. Even if you do, it bears repeating. We are champions when it comes to voting as compared with our peers. In fact, since the Olympics are going on, permit me an Olympics analogy, we are almost always on the medal stand. We are almost always bronze, silver, or gold. In fact, we recently came off a streak of 3 in a row where Minnesota was #1 in America in voter turnout. That's something to really be proud of. Now, in the last election, you may be wondering, how did we do in the very last statewide election, which was 2024, the big presidential election? Well, it depends whose numbers you believe. If you believe the numbers put out by the federal government, we were once again, for a 4th time, #1 in America. However, if you believe an equally reputable set of numbers put out by some academics in Florida, they had us at #2, missing out by 0.2%. That is achingly close, but that's not the worst of it. The worst of it, in my book, is that they had us losing to Wisconsin. And I'm sorry, that is just intolerable. Just intolerable. Come on, it's a border battle with everything. Sports, food, everything else. Why should this be any different? So if you believe that second set of numbers, we'll get them next time. If you agree the first set of numbers, we already got them, right? And we're poised to do very well this year as well. And you know, there are a lot of reasons why Minnesota does so well, so often, so consistently. And by the way, this goes beyond the last 4 or 5 election cycles, and way beyond my tenure in office. This goes back decades, where Minnesota has consistently and reliably been at the top of the heap. By the way, across zip codes, across county lines, across political lines and allegiances in so-called red areas and so-called blue areas, we vote in sky-high numbers in Minnesota. And I often get asked why I think that is. And I think it boils down to a couple things: good laws and good culture. We have good laws in Minnesota, stretching back a long, long time, starting, I think, with the jewel in the crown, passed in 1973, which is Election Day or same-day voter registration, which is what it sounds like. It means that in Minnesota, as long as you can show that you are who you say you are, and you live where you say you live, the two things you need to show to register to vote, it's okay if you do that on game day in the state of Minnesota at your polling place. As long as you can show the stuff, that's okay. But, you know, even 53 years later, most of America does not have that rule. In most of America and in most states, and maybe some of you have lived for a time in those states, the rule is if you're not registered to vote a month before the election, you're done. You are out. So in most of America, there is no such thing, for example, as registering to vote on Halloween in late October. Doesn't exist. It's not lawful. Can't do it. Because if you're not registered to vote by early October, that's it. It's a hard line. Doesn't matter if you're new to the state, misunderstood the law, or in the hospital, whatever the situation, that's the rule there. But for 53 years, we've said in Minnesota that's not who and what we want to be. So that's one example. The other example is that in Minnesota, of course, you can vote from home if you want to. You don't have to go to a particular place on a particular day during particular hours. Now, I like to do that. I like to vote the traditional way. I have 2 kids. I love to bring them to the polling place. I love to thank the election judges. I love the carnival atmosphere of Election Day. Of course, you'd expect me to love that, right? But not everyone wants to do it that way. And more, increasingly, people are wanting to vote in different ways. Remember, we have 3 ways to vote in Minnesota. One is to vote the traditional way. One is to vote early in person or by absentee during the absentee period in person at a city hall or a county courthouse or the like. And then the third way is to vote from home. And that last component is becoming more and more popular as people seek maybe the extra time or the extra convenience of voting from their kitchen table. But the point is that in Minnesota we have that option, as many states do. That's another example. And then on the security side, we have good laws as well, not just on the access side. And in any election system, I think you're always seeking out that perfect blend, if possible, of access and security. Access meaning, let's not make this thing an obstacle course if we don't have to. Let's make it straightforward. Let's make it approachable. Let's make it simple. And security means, of course, that you want to make sure that only eligible voters and no one else is taking advantage of that accessibility. And on the access side, I've discussed a couple examples, but on the security side, look at the way that we vote by mail as a good example. Because I understand the person in this room or anywhere in Minnesota who says, you know, help me out here. How can voting by mail be secure? You're telling me there are hundreds of thousands of blank ballots, maybe over 1 million in some elections. Blank canvases. Blank ballots just kind of floating out there in the election system. Just, you know, floating around in the Postal Service, floating around in residential mailboxes. What is to prevent a mailbox thief from going into a neighborhood and plucking out 1 or 10 or 100 of those things to vote for himself? How is that possibly secure? It's a fair question. The answer is in Minnesota, we have security features that almost no other state has. Namely, when you order the ballot to come to you so you can vote from your kitchen table, you don't just order the ballot. You now have to provide both your social security number and a driver's license number, and you have to sign the ballot, and you have to have a witness who's eligible to vote in Minnesota sign the ballot. So back to the mailbox thief. The only way he will possibly be successful is if he knows the precise form of personal identifying information, the social and the driver's license, that you used when you ordered that ballot, and he forges your signature, and he forges the witness's signature. It's a pretty tall order. Is it possible? Sure, it is. It is possible to do that. But because it's so improbable and unlikely, that probably explains why, in my time as Secretary of State, I have not seen one example, not one. If there are examples, they have escaped my notice. But it's a very, very remote possibility, and it's a very secure system. So that's an example of, I think, the laws that do us a lot of good in Minnesota and give people a lot of comfort, both on the access and security side. But of course, laws aren't everything. And I think laws are part of the equation, but you've also got to look at the cultural side of this too. It's laws and culture. Whether it's what's taught in our schools, whether it's having a strong nonprofit sector or a business community that cares about voting or a media culture that covers voting, I think we have that in Minnesota. And the cultural piece is really important because, we don't have mandatory voting in America. I wouldn't support it, but you don't have to vote. and I like that. I think the right to vote is also the right not to vote. Incidentally, there are countries on earth, Brazil, Belgium, Australia, that have mandatory compulsory voting where you got to vote or else you're fined, and even worse. We don't have that, which means you can have all the great laws you want and they look really pretty on a piece of paper, but unless someone wants to vote, you're not going to get people to vote. And so that cultural piece is important, which is why our hosts tonight, our sponsors tonight, are such important pillars of the community in many ways, but one of which is stressing civic engagement up to and including voting. That's very, very important, I think. So in Minnesota, I think we have both the good laws and the good culture when it comes to voting. So when it comes to the high turnout piece, I feel pretty confident. This is Minnesota. We are Minnesotans. We have a lot on the ballot this fall of interest to a lot of people, whether it's governor or constitutional officers or the legislature or county commissioners. There's a lot going on this year to inspire a lot of people, a lot of contests, etc. And we've got the laws and we've got the culture that ought to sustain our excellent record of voter turnout. And I'll be damned if we let Wisconsin beat us, right? We've got a reputation to uphold. We want to be number one again. Oh, I forgot to mention, too, no matter whose numbers you believe, whether it's the Florida people's or the federal government's numbers, here's what no one disputes. No one disputes. All the numbers show this. In the 2024 election, Minnesota was the undisputed national champion when it came to youth voter turnout, which really bodes well for the future. So with a pretty big cushion and room to spare, we were number one in the country among 18 to 29-year-olds. And that's great, because all the data and all the evidence shows that if you can get young people to vote, particularly that first time they're eligible at 18, 19, or 20, it is far more likely that they will make it a lifelong habit, as opposed to the person who picks it up for the first time at age 28 or 31 or 42 or whatever. So that is really good in terms of building that foundation for the future. But remember, I said I had two wishes for the coming election. High turnout's only one of them. And I'm pretty confident that we're going to have high turnout in Minnesota. Hopefully number one, but we'll be on that medal stand. I'm almost positive. But what about low drama? Got to have low drama. High turnout's great, but we want low drama. And that's tougher and tougher as the years go by in this really sort of combative political atmosphere that we have in our country. But Minnesota, fortunately, has done really well when it comes to low drama as well. We have not, knock on wood, had some of the problems and challenges and even threats that other states have had, with discord and disruption, and in some limited cases, even violence, either at the polling place or around the election period. We have not had that. Just because we haven't had it doesn't mean we couldn't have it. And so we have to be on watch. We have to be always vigilant about making sure we have that. Fortunately, I think we're in good shape, but I do want to mention a couple things that we have our eye on, that I have my eye on, that are potential sources of drama. One is just plain old mis- and disinformation about our election system, okay? And when I talk about disinformation in particular, I want to be clear what I mean here. When I talk about disinformation about elections, I don't mean disagreement. It would be wrong of me or anyone to say, anyone who disagrees with me on election policy, you're just peddling a bunch of disinformation. That's not an honest thing to say. So anyone in this room or anywhere is free to disagree with me or criticize me or whatever. I would never say that a person who does those things is just some peddler of disinformation. When I'm talking about disinformation, I'm talking about the spread of knowingly false information about our election system for whatever purpose, political, economic, both, some other. And let me give you a couple examples of what I mean. Remember at the very beginning when I got up here, I told you we don't count votes. And we don't. These are some of the vote counters right here. We don't count votes. We transmit their totals on our website and otherwise, but we don't do that. We don't touch it. We're not in the same room or the same county as where the ballots are, so we don't do that. But I tell you, right now it would take you about 60 seconds on your device to go do a search, and you will find people out there, political actors, people on social media who are saying that not just I, but my colleagues across the country, we're not just counting the votes, we're rigging, fixing, and stealing the votes. In fact, we're spiking up the vote totals for the candidates we like, and we're depressing the vote totals for the candidates we don't like. Look, that's beyond just disagreement. That is literally false. I mean, it's not even in our wheelhouse. It's not even something we do. I don't know how I would do that if I even wanted to do that. I don't have the authority. I don't have the access to the votes. There are a million eyes on everything. So I don't know how I would even go about doing that. That's what I mean by disinformation. Let me give you one other example of disinformation, and stick with me. This is getting into the weeds just a little bit, but if there's any room in Minnesota where I can get into the weeds, it's this one tonight, right? You're all here because you're interested in these issues. So, the issue of the timing of election results has been weaponized, unfortunately, and is something that is rife with disinformation. So, during the COVID election of 2020, just to take an example, we saw nationwide a huge spike in people wanting to vote from home for all the obvious reasons. This was pre-vaccine America, after all, in November of 2020, and people, for all the obvious reasons during that time, did not want to, if they didn't have to, go and mix it up with a ton of people in public, like in a polling place or a hardware store or a grocery store, and many people didn't just want to do that at the time. So in Minnesota and every place I'm aware of in America, there was a huge spike in the number of people who wanted to vote by mail. So in Minnesota, we had that problem taken care of in the sense of the counting of the ballots. We, in Minnesota, have always had what I call sort of a head start period. I don't know what you all call it, but I call it that just as a slang term, meaning those who do the vote counting, not us, but those who do the vote counting, they can start opening those envelopes that come in before Election Day. It used to be a week, now it's a couple weeks, where in advance of the election, they don't have to wait till Election Day to start opening it. So you can imagine in 2020, across the nation, there was this huge surge of mail voting. Imagine, particularly in very large counties, imagine this slowly growing mountain of mail as people are mailing in their ballots. Really in every county, but the bigger the county, the bigger the mountain, the bigger the pile. And in Minnesota, we had that taken care of because the legislature said, yeah, you can start opening those up in 2 weeks. So some of our panelists here and others were opening them up 2 weeks in advance during the COVID election so that they weren't caught flat-footed. They could get a head start in processing those ballots and making sure that they were ready to count on election night. Now that's us in Minnesota. We're fortunate, we're lucky, we have policymakers on a bipartisan basis who saw the need for that, and it was really uncontroversial. But not every state has a law like that. And some of the states without laws like that are presidential battleground states, like Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, there were some folks who wanted to get a Head Start law like Minnesota has, but for a lot of reasons I won't go into, they didn't do that. So in Pennsylvania, during the COVID election of 2020, the rule there was those mountains of mail, well, election administrators like our panelists, you can't even start opening those envelopes until after polls close on election night. Imagine that. Millions in a state like Pennsylvania in those mountains of mail, and they couldn't even touch them until the close of polls on election night, which meant what? It meant the common sense thing you think it means. Of course they were still counting those ballots on Wednesday. Of course they were still counting those ballots on Thursday and even into Friday. Of course they were. What else did you think was going to happen? So the problem, the disinformation problem, is to this day, a myth persists that, look at this rigging, fixing, and stealing. I mean, the total was this for candidate A on election night, and it was this for candidate B on election night, and suddenly it changed. 2 days later, it changed. I mean, candidate A was in the lead on election night, and then suddenly candidate B and hundreds of thousands of votes. It's rigging, it's fixing, it's stealing. No, it was none of those things. It was counting. It was counting validly cast votes by U.S. citizens who were eligible to vote, period. But to this day, that myth, that disinformation persists. That is knowingly false information. The fact that votes came in 2 days later, of course they did. They told you that's what would happen, and it was all done with everybody watching. But that's an example of disinformation, and I fear that that hasn't subsided. Maybe that particular example has, but there's this weaponization of aspects of our election system meant to make it look somehow insecure or flimsy or suspicious. When in Minnesota we know that because of the laws we have and because of the people implementing them on the ground, on the front lines, and your friends and neighbors, the 30,000 election judges across Minnesota in the polling place, we know our system is fundamentally fair, accurate, honest, and secure. We know that. But disinformation lurks. And so how do you take care of that? There's no simple answer. We want to always confront it. We want to always rebut it. We want to always say not just what's wrong, but what is right and what is true about our election system. And we want to be as transparent as we can possibly be as well. So that's one thing that I worry about in terms of peace in the valley, and one thing I worry about in terms of ensuring that we have low drama. But there is one other thing as well that I just wanted to touch upon before I close that is also of concern to many people in the elections community nationwide. And I'm not speaking for anyone, I'm speaking only for myself. Our panelists are just fine speaking for themselves, and they may or may not agree with me. But what I'm picking up nationwide, particularly among my Secretary of State colleagues, is a fear, not necessarily prediction, but a fear about the possibility of federal interference in our election, either directly or indirectly, either intentionally or even unintentionally. And that is a fear that I'm really sensing out there. What form that will take, it's tough to say, but we've seen some things recently that are cause for concern, at least for me, not speaking for anyone else in this room, but only for me. So whether it's the president's call to nationalize, as he said, or take over, his exact words, elections in 15 or so states, that's one thing. Whether it's the FBI raid of the Fulton County Election Office to confiscate 700 boxes full of materials, purportedly over worries about the 2020 election results, that is a worry. And so we're seeing efforts by the federal government to step into the space of elections administration, which make a lot of us uncomfortable. Article 1, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution couldn't be much clearer. It says that states are in charge of the time, place, and manner of elections, except that Congress can intervene. Congress can pass a law, like the Voting Rights Act of 1965, for example, where they can step into that space. But the Constitution says nothing about any president, this one or anyone, doesn't matter the political party. It says nothing about a president just being able, by the stroke of a pen or the wave of a wand or the issuing of an executive order, to start taking over parts of elections administration. So that is something that's worrisome. There is a concern in some places, among some people, about what if there is the presence of federal personnel in and around polling places in particular cities or in particular places. Again, I want to make very clear, it's not a prediction on my part, but I think we have to take the precaution of at least thinking about what we would do if that happened. You know, we have an all hazards approach in our office when it comes to planning for election. We work with our partners at every level of government. We work with law enforcement. We work with anyone we can to plan for contingencies, to plan, like anything in life and any job in life, you hope for the best but plan for the worst, right? Our job is no different than yours or anyone you know. And so we plan for and think about things like bomb threats or power outages or weather events. And sadly, but I think realistically, we have to add to that bucket the possibility of some sort of direct or indirect federal interference. Now, I think we're equipped well in Minnesota to handle that. And let me just give you one sort of sub-example. To those who are worried about the presence, whether intentional or not, of federal personnel around certain polling places during election time, I will tell you that we have the benefit in Minnesota of very clear laws on that subject. Not just laws, but clear laws. Clarity goes a long, long way. And our laws are super clear. And here's the law in Minnesota. The only folks who can be within 100 feet of the entrance of a polling place are voters, election workers, anyone who naturally works in that building, the school, the city hall, the church, etc., and one person, only one per polling place, from each political party to be the eyes and ears of that political party. Not a swarm of 20 people. It can only be one representing the Democrats, one representing the Republicans, etc. That's who can be in the polling place. We have a parallel law in Minnesota, and have had for many decades, this is not fresh or new, that says it is unlawful to post law enforcement of any kind, state, federal, or local, at a polling place preemptively. So even if it's with the best of intentions, if a mayor or a sheriff or someone says, hey, you know, I mean well here, I mean nothing by it, but you know those folks over in crazy Precinct 7, things get a little spicy over there, so you know, why don't we just, to calm everyone down, post a police officer, you know, at the entrance of Precinct 7. You can't do that in Minnesota. Now, of course, law enforcement can respond to a call from election judges. Of course, if there's a fist fight that breaks out, or you know something else happens, or someone has a health event, of course you can call law enforcement. That's a no-brainer. That's common sense. But you can't in advance say, hey, we think something's going to go wrong there. Let's put a cop there, or a sheriff's deputy there, or somebody from ICE or Border Patrol, or whoever it is. It's state, federal, and local. And so I think we're well equipped to withstand and push back even the unintentional presence of law enforcement who don't need to be there. So I feel very good about that. But it's something we have to keep our eye on. Again, it's not a prediction. I want to be very clear. I don't want to be overly alarmist. I'm just saying it's a precaution, and it belongs in that same bucket as the tornado or the power outage or the bomb threat or anything else. So I just want you to know that we are working on this with national partners. We're working on it with other states, Secretary of State's offices, and of course with our partners in Minnesota. We all want the same thing. We want high turnout. We want low drama. We want what Minnesotans expect and deserve and have almost always gotten, which is an election that is sort of an oasis of calm, right? That's what we want. People are going to vote the way they're going to vote. It's none of my concern how they vote, just that they vote and they can vote in peace and no one is bothered unnecessarily. That's what we want. High turnout, low drama. That's the goal for the next 8.5 months. So I want to thank you for your time and attention. I'm looking forward to hearing, I'm going to try to talk less and let them talk more. They're the ones on the front lines. They are our partners. They are our teammates, the ones who deserve so much gratitude, and the ones who do this job and employ their craft in Minnesota with such competence and such precision, even when the cameras aren't rolling, even when the press isn't there. They do the unsung hero work of making sure our elections run smoothly. So I'm really pleased and privileged to be one of 4 members of this panel of the people who really do the very hard work of administering our elections and do it so brilliantly and so well throughout the state of Minnesota. So thank you for your time and attention and for being very good partners in the democracy business. Thank you.
Now we'll give you a little ground rules for the next part of the program. We're going to move into the panelist portion, and you're going to be hearing from each of the members of the panel. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. But you all have note cards and tables in front of you. If you don't, you can still raise a hand. We've got walkers that will come around. If you have a question that you would like asked of this panel, please submit that question, and we will bring those up after we let them speak a little bit first. And so if you want to see what they have to say, if they maybe your question won't be relative, but if you want to make sure your question is answered in some form or fashion, we want to have you heard as well. So I want to have you start. Steve, you've already had a chance to introduce yourself, so I'm going to move down the line. Heather, would you start?
Yep. My name is Heather Anderson. I am the clerk for Lake Eunice Township. I'm also the Clerk-Treasurer for the Becker County Township Association, which is our association to advocate for all of the townships, 37 townships in Becker County. I never thought I'd be sitting at a table with the Secretary of State of Minnesota. I just want to say I'm honored to be here. I'm going to take a page out of his playbook. Show of hands, tell me who has voted at a little township town hall? Oh! So thank you for that. That warms my heart tonight while I'm here. I get kind of emotional because that's why I do this job. Lake Eunice Township is my township. There are 1,242 registered voters. Lake Eunice Township is located over by Audubon, Minnesota, Cormorant Lakes area, Leaf Lake area, Little Cormorant area. I will tell you I've been the clerk for 8 years. I am on the ballot March 10th to be probably voted in, hopefully voted in, we'll see. I just want to remind everyone that township elections are March 10th. Your polling station, if it is open, if you're not mail-in, will be open from 5 to 8. So I just want to encourage everyone to get out to their townships. Sounds like some people have. I appreciate everyone. I'm going to pass it to my next. Go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Kari Tyson. I'm the city clerk for the city of Detroit Lakes. I've been in Detroit Lakes for just over 6.5 years. Came from a prior city before that, so I've got about 11 years of service. This will be my 4th election in the city of Detroit Lakes and running that election. I just wanted to touch briefly on a couple things that I specifically do to help coordinate elections, to help clarify and educate everybody that's here this evening. So months in advance, right, planning and coordination happens, and along with that comes confirming of precinct boundaries. So when annexations and things like that happen, we have to adjust our precinct boundaries within the city of Detroit Lakes. Securing polling locations and staffing. It takes about 30 or so election judges to run an election in the city of Detroit Lakes. So I'm always recruiting anywhere from 30 to 40 election judges every 2 years. So my little plug, if you want to be an election judge, let me know. So along with securing the polling locations, making sure those locations are ADA compliant with state and federal guidelines so that everybody has the same opportunity to vote. I work with the utility department for the city to plan for power outages and making sure that if power does go out, that we are one of the first locations to get restored, just so that everybody gets to vote. And then I also review, like Secretary Simon said, the security protocols for that day. I talked a little bit about poll election or election judges and recruiting and training. Thankfully, Becker County puts on all of that training for us, but it's my job to make sure that all the judges that I have do get certified and have that certification on election day. Assigning them to their specific polling locations so that we also make sure we have equal representation at each polling location with both parties is essential. When it comes to equipment preparation and testing, that is handled by Becker County, but I do go over and also assist in making sure that our stuff is accurate. When it comes to communication for the voters, I'm the essential for updating the website with polling locations, hours, and any voter information. I'm also in charge of any candidates that file with the city and making sure that they have all of the documents that they need and all of their paperwork is accurate. Before elections, usually a couple weeks before, myself and a couple other people will also go into the healthcare facilities in Detroit Lakes and conduct healthcare voting. So for those that are essentially residents of a nursing home, they still have the right to vote. And it's essential that we go into those facilities and provide that opportunity for them. The day before elections, city staff and myself, we prepare the polling locations. So that means putting up the equipment, making sure all the signage and everything else is there. I meet with the head judges, so I have 3 wards in the city of Detroit Lakes, so I have 3 head judges that handle each polling location, and I'm essentially grateful for the work that they put in because they take a lot of this work off of my plate. And we go over everything that they need to know for the day of, and they're also in charge of making sure that they receive the ballots in preparation for the day before, and that those ballots remain secure until polls open the next morning. So on election day, we are there early, an hour or so before polls open. Signage gets posted, accessibility routes are marked, the flag gets put out, all of the important details for the day. At the end of the day, those polls close, ballots are counted, and sealed and transported back to Becker County, where the real work begins, where they handle all of the extra stuff that they get to do with the ballots. We also, let's see here, I lost my spot. Tanya will probably talk about this, but they're responsible for transmitting those results to the state office and making sure that the equipment is secured after the election. And then after the election, myself and the head judges, a lot of times I'll analyze what went well, what didn't go well, and then I'll make those notes and make sure that gets documented for years to come so that we can plan and make those adjustments accordingly. So that's a little bit what I do. I'll let Tanya talk to what she does.
I'm going to interrupt just a second. You did a great job of telling us that role, but now I want to back up. Heather, I want you to kind of share that picture of what happens at that township level too before I let Tanya go into her spiel. So I'm walking in to vote at my township place. Take it from there.
So you want me to be the voter. You don't want me to describe the work I do.
Both.
Both. Oh my goodness. Well, so for the township clerk, I guess my duties mimic a lot of what she talks about. For a township clerk, your job starts with elections months before. You're responsible to put postings in the paper. You're responsible to put postings up, be in charge of the election schedule. We reach out to the election judges. I'm in charge of the potluck for the election town hall.
That's important.
And that's what keeps me getting elected, is that is it. So there's all these things that happen well before an election occurs. I am the cleaning lady. I clean up stink bugs constantly. My town hall is a schoolhouse from 1910. It's 1,000 square feet, and we have up to 1,242 registered voters. I shovel, I break ice, I'm sprinkling salt, everything. I buy light bulbs because if I don't have them, what am I going to do that day? So there's a lot of things that happen before to get that town hall polling place ready. Like she mentioned, the courthouse, the Becker County Treasurer's Office, they, Auditor-Treasurer, they support us. We get all of our equipment from them. They do our testing of the equipment. So there's a lot that happens. The day of the election, it's a 16-hour day for me. I'm the first one there. I'm there by 5 a.m., 6 a.m. Turning on the lights, making sure the heat is on, making sure the bathroom works, getting everything in place, and then my election judges come. And that's when the fun starts, when the election judges get there, start marking the ballots, doing all the things, getting everything ready, so when that person walks in that town hall, usually about 6:45, we open at 7, but some like to come and watch us, which is fantastic. We like to be ready. The biggest thing with the township, and many of you that have voted there might see this, it's like a family. When someone walks into that town hall, they might have gone to school there, let's be completely honest, but they know us. We know them, we know their name. The first thing a person does when they walk in is we have a, what's that book called?
Roster.
The roster.
Roster, where we look to see if someone's registered. Because if they're not registered, we take them to a different part of the town hall and get that ready. But we like to get people involved in the elections. We like to move them through very quickly because we're so small. And so we have stations throughout our town hall that we've designated to get people through efficiently. For me, that's a long day. When we close the polls, that's when the work starts. And I sometimes can't add. And I mean, like, you're so tired. You are so tired. That's the reality. But I have the best judges. And we are there. We are committed to accuracy. We want every one of those votes to count. It means something to us when our families or our neighbors walk in and they vote. So we want to make sure that we have everything that we need. We do the summary statement. Then I, myself, and another judge of a different party, we drive everything back into Detroit Lakes. That's when we go to the county office. We turn everything in. We make sure that we turn the tape, everything you've given us, the totes. You wouldn't believe the equipment we have, and we return it. And then maybe I'll go to sleep after that. But that's what a township election looks like. So all of you that vote at townships, I can't tell you what a wonderful process it is internally for us, and we appreciate you coming. We appreciate your patience, but we love it. We love it. For a person that comes and votes, like I said, we try to get them through efficiently because we're a small town hall. We've worked very hard to make our town hall handicapped accessible. We work very hard to ensure people have the ability to curbside vote, which is really important as people continue to age. When we hear that car pull up and we have honk if you need to vote, we get on that because we want people to still be a part of that process, even if they can't maybe physically get out of the car and come into that town hall. So that's just a little snapshot, I guess, of my job, what people expect when they come in to vote. And the biggest thing, get that sticker. Get that sticker.
Tanya, I'm going to go head down to you, but I'm going to have you back up just a little bit because you do a lot of work before we ever get to the ballots.
That is true.
So would you kind of give us a little heads up on that process?
Okay, do you want me to start with that, or do you want me to start with?
First, tell us a little bit about your overall view.
Perfect. All right. So I'm Tanya Hockett. I'm the Chief Deputy Auditor-Treasurer for Becker County. And along with myself, I have 5 fabulous full-time staff members. 2 of them are here tonight. Mackenzie and Zach were able to come. And most of our stuff wouldn't happen without just having great staff that knows exactly what we do. I know you talk about your equipment, and that would be Mackenzie. She heads that up. She does that with our polling rosters that we just started with. I think it's been 2 years now doing the rosters. Electronic rosters?
It's been,
This will be the second.
Second.
Yeah, the
year.
second, this will be our second year. So that we've seen has been pretty good. And so with that, when we talk about Becker County in a whole, we have about 22,900 voters in Becker County. Within that, we have a total of 37 townships, and I know when we talk about our March township elections, we have 32 of them that's going to be having those right on what Heather said. March 10th will be 32 townships having their general election. All of our March township elections hold those in their polling locations. On that night, we don't have any mail ballots for the general elections. We also have 7 cities. That's how we have our largest one, which is Kari here. And then we have 3 home schools. So when we look at that, we have a total of 47 clerks that our office is in constant contact, 3 of those being our school districts. And overall, we train about 360 election judges for Becker County, and we have 79 ballot styles that we test for all of our equipment testing. So because of our surrounding school districts, we have another 8 school districts that are our non-home schools. So that's how we get to about testing of about 79 different ballot styles. So how did I get involved with elections? Well, I've been with Becker County. It'll be my 28th year here in May. I started back in 2006 with the first HAVA grant, which brought the election equipment into Becker County. I did the public accuracy and the preliminary testing. Then I was also heavily involved when we had the recount in 2008 of the Franken-Coleman, 2010 when we had the governor recount. In 2011 is when I officially became like the election administrator for Becker County, and that was my first year of doing redistricting for the first time. So that was an interesting process. And 2, we do have 16 mail ballot precincts during general elections. So that sums up about that.
And
Can
she's
you
not
just
giving
explain that
herself-
just a little bit more, what that means?
Sure.
I want to say she's not giving herself or her office and her staff enough credit. The training that
Yes,
they give
so-
our clerks, she's not giving herself enough credit.
So we'll talk about all that stuff. So when we talk about the 16 mail ballot precincts is what you wanted to know about? Okay. So we do have 16 polling locations that are mail ballot precincts. So that would mean on like 30 days before the election, our office would mail them their mail ballots, meaning that is for any registered voter in that precinct, they would receive that ballot to vote. The absentees, we mail those out about, they have to be mailed 46 days before the election, and that would be how those persons would vote, and that is mailed to all permanent absentee voters, UCAVAs, and anybody who has completed those applications. So, but when we talk about when do we start elections, in our office, I think it was the end of January when we had to pull out our calendars, because with us, there's 6 of us. And we're not only doing elections, we're doing property tax calculations, we're prepping for next year's taxes, we're still working on payroll. So we have multiple other things in addition to all of our other auditing that we do for the county. So we're busy working on all that, so we have to pull out our calendars and try and get everything aligned so we know where everything will fit in. And this year we also are converting our tax system, so yay! We're busy. But we do love elections, and so we like to make sure everything's ready. And like I said, our publishing, you know, we start with our first training when the Secretary or the Office of the Secretary of State kicks off our training in April, and it is full force until we get to Thanksgiving.
Now, you've also heard, Tanya, that from the township or the individual polling sites, as well as from the city, they all get to bring it to the courthouse.
Yes, they do.
Then what happens?
So we want to talk from there. Okay, so on election night, now remember, in the meantime, when they're busy working, getting all those totals, we also have our absentee ballot board, and our mail ballot board processing those ballots for the absentees. Now, we do get to start 2 weeks prior of opening those ballots and start processing, but at the end of that night, we have to have staff that can complete those precinct summaries and certify those results too for absentee mail ballot. In the meantime, they're coming in with their stuff to us. With that, we have verification tables. So as soon as those persons bring that in, we have verification tables that they must go through. So when we talk about like the checks and the balances, if I tell Kari, you have 2,000 ballots for this precinct, she needs to bring me back 2,000 ballots. And if she don't, she gets to go to the special table. Then she gets to see me. But I'm just saying, that's how we process it there. If we don't, we work through it, and then we will upload our results. And then once those are all finished, that's when we will upload it to the Secretary of State's office.
Do you want to interchange your thoughts and ideas with each other to piggyback on your processes of that interdependency? Does that make sense? I think you pretty well laid it out, but now it's your time. If you guys have any other questions, you can go ahead and hold those up, and we've got runners that'll come around and pick those up from you. And we're going to give it a few moments, but meanwhile, I've got a couple other questions. I'm just going to let you talk a little bit while they're asking some of those questions. But what do you wish the public knew about voting and the election process that you don't think they really do know? Do you want to just add on to that?
Sure. I actually have a couple things for that. Well, the first one would have been the checks and balances, with the ballots, because we keep track of how many ballots we order for that precinct, how many is given to that precinct, how many comes back to us. So those are always, verified, etc. Even with like our mail ballots, how many we receive our mail ballots in that day. We do constant audits of how many came in, recording, processing, etc. And to the other item that we had thought of I don't think that people realize the costs that are associated with the elections, and especially with the absentee ballots. Only because when we look at our county, we look at, hey, we have 22,900 voters. So we would assume we were going to order 22,900 ballots. Let's just say, okay? Well, when a person will ask for an absentee ballot or request it, we will prepare that ballot, send them out to them. But then they might decide not to vote that ballot. So now we have 2 ballots for you. And so we just got done completing a vacant school district 2889, just had to hold a special election. So I kind of just ran some totals off of that most current election. So when we talk about an absentee ballot, based on just programming and the programming of it, the mailing of an absentee ballot, if you included all those costs for that, just for a ballot alone for the programming and the printing of it is about $1.98 for that ballot. So we figure about $2 per ballot. Now when we talk about mailing out that ballot to you, which does not include any cost of staff, that ballot cost about $3.91 for the number of envelopes we have to send and the postage. So each one of those is about $4, not including the extra ballot for coming in and voting in person.
And I would just like to add about the budget and the cost of elections. So we are a township that, we're not flush with cash, I guess, right? Our township money goes to snow plowing, roads, bridges. And the last 4 years, our township has had to do a line item budget of $10,000 each year to pay for these elections. Elections are getting more and more expensive. I'm having to pay staff more than we used to. I'm having to borrow judges from other townships, and they might pay people better than like Eunice Township. The time the equipment, the supplies increase, and that takes money away from our township budget for roads and bridges. So I guess I would be remiss to be sitting next to the Secretary of State tonight and not say, is there a way to look at Minnesota putting some money towards our elections? And I appreciate the grants that we've gotten, and I appreciate the amounts that we've gotten, some small grants through the years. Not every township wants to do that because it takes time. And I'm not a full-time employee. This is my part-time job as a township clerk. So not everyone wants to take on the responsibilities of a grant. But I would just like to throw in the universe that at some point, you know.
I'll second that.
Okay. So I started the conversation. I'm always that. I'm always
can I
that
speak
one.
to that? Amen. I will hold the door open for you. I completely agree with that. But here are some hopeful signs. So, some of you may remember this, but back in 2016, the legislature made the decision that when it comes to presidential election years, we were going to move from a caucus system to an actual bona fide real primary, a statewide presidential primary. So 2020 was the first year of that, 2024 was the second year of that. But that's a very expensive thing.
Yes.
So I and many, not just me, I and a coalition of people said to the legislature, look, you can do that, but just understand what you're asking our local elections administrators to do. You're telling them that once every 4 years during the presidential election year, instead of having to administer 2 statewide elections, which is the August primary and the November general, now you're telling them every 4 years they've got to do 3 statewide elections. A presidential primary in March, the regular August primary in August, and of course the November general election. So we set what I think was a positive precedent. We went to the legislature and we said, great, if you want to do this, great, but please reimburse counties, cities, and townships for those costs. And they agreed. They agreed, which I think was an acknowledgement back in 2016, 10 years ago already, that yeah, this is expensive and we're asking them to do a lot extra in that election year. And by the way, you heard it here, and this is the message that I try to get out to folks. You know, out of the 87 counties in Minnesota, only 9 have full-time, year-round, elections-only offices, where that's all they do. Hennepin County Department of Elections. They don't do any other responsibility. In the vast majority of 87 counties, the folks who do elections wear a lot of hats. They do property taxes. In some cases, they do public inspections. In some cases, they do ditch and drainage work. You know, this is a lot of shared responsibilities. So you got to understand, legislature, that when you impose these laws, don't have Hennepin County in your mind, right? Where they have just an elections department that does only that. The vast majority of Minnesotans don't live like that. So 2016 is one hopeful sign, an acknowledgement by the legislature, and it's still in place. And we administer that reimbursement process. So the legislature gives us the money, and then I'll spare you all the details. But we basically pay counties, cities, and townships for that. Then a couple years later, we went to the legislature and we said, look, elections are getting expensive. Elections equipment is expensive. Those are expensive machines, those tabulators and other things. Can we get a one-time infusion of cash from you, the legislature, to help offset the cost? Not to buy out and buy everything for everybody, but at least offset, put a dent in the cost. And they said, again, on a broad bipartisan basis, yes, that's fair. And we did that. Then, a couple years ago, we went beyond that and we said, okay, instead of a one-time for the presidential primary and every so often have a burst of funds, can we please, for the first time since statehood, can we start a fund that will be used for exactly what you said, to help offset costs? And we call it the voter fund, first time in state history. Now, it's got $4 or $5 million in it, which is not a lot of money. I'd like to see a zero after that. But because you can do the math, 4 or 5 million divided by 87 counties, it's not a fortune. But at least we've got the base on which to build. We've got an acknowledgement from the legislature that this fund should exist, that it's a worthy thing, that elections are expensive. Now we just got to keep after it to make sure we're stocking that fund with the money that it takes to put a real dent in these costs. So I'm more of an optimist than a pessimist on that. It's easy for me to say. You're the ones having to crunch the numbers. But those are 3 things over the last decade where the legislature has really acknowledged, yeah, you know what? These are expensive and we are going to help out. So we got them in the right frame of mind, and it's totally nonpartisan. I mean, Republicans, Democrats, they all get it because they all represent counties, cities, and townships, and they know this. So there is some cause for optimism.
Thank you.
And I'll just kind of touch base on that too. So for us at the city, you know, when it comes to funding elections, they do get very expensive when you're looking at 40 election judges and $20 an hour and 16-hour days, and that cost adds up rather quickly. And so actually at this last city council meeting, thankful for what the state of Minnesota did. They put together some money for polling place accessibility, and we were lucky enough to be a recipient of that grant. I had applied for curbside voting, essentially. So if you vote in the city of Detroit Lakes, you're familiar with our facilities. They are churches, and a lot of times they are interior rooms of these churches. And so when people were coming and pulling up to the curbside voting spot, if we were busy, which we quite frequently are, they would sit there for an unknown amount of time. And sometimes they'd get lucky and somebody would walk by and say, I'll let them know you're waiting. And then we could go out and address them. So this year, effective at the primary election, we will have doorbells, essentially, thanks to the grant. So what will happen is you can pull into your parking spot, the curbside voting location. You'll be able to roll down your window and press a button, and it'll chime inside. And then as soon as we can, we'll have 2 election judges out to your vehicle. So hopefully you guys won't have to wait or give up on waiting and just come in. So that was thankful to the state of Minnesota to pay for those. So.
I have some of those questions, and the first one, I will let whomever wishes to answer it do so. Explain provisional ballots.
I can take a crack at it.
I just voted. I voted in Tim.
So a provisional ballot, Minnesota, first of all, it's something Minnesota does not have. And the reason we don't have it is because when Congress passed a law called the National Voter Registration Act in 1993, Minnesota was exempted. And we were exempted because we're a state that has same-day voter registration. I'll get to why those two things matter or how they're related. But so what a provisional ballot is a situation where somebody, for whatever reason, doesn't have what they need to show that they're voters or eligible to vote. And what some states do is they say, I'll tell you what, you can vote provisionally. We're going to give you a ballot, but within, say, a week, you've got to come and show us that you are who you say you are and you live where you say you live, okay? Now, sounds great, and for many states, it's a great fit. But in Minnesota, because we have same-day voter registration, that's not an issue. You can register to vote right there. So let me give you an example. Let's say in August before the election year, you're walking down a main street somewhere and a college kid comes to you with a clipboard and says, we're doing a voter registration event, care to register to vote? And you say, great, I just moved to Minnesota, I just moved to Detroit Lakes, great, I've been thinking about registering to vote. Sure, I'll sign the paper form, thanks. Good luck with your voter registration effort. And you stroll in November to your polling place, and you say, okay, I'm registered to vote, and they say, you're not on the list. And you say, well, that's impossible. And I remember it. It was August, I had an ice cream cone in my hand, I was walking down Main Street, I remember it vividly, and I signed the thing, and I'm sorry, they must not have turned it in. And maybe it turns out, not to disparage college kids, but maybe it ended up in a trunk somewhere and someone didn't follow through and turn it in. Okay, in Minnesota, that's not a problem. Because in Minnesota, if that happened to you, you just say, all right, well, that's disappointing. Sound like the college kid didn't turn in my form. But since this is Minnesota, I can register right here, same day. So you don't really need a provisional ballot because in Minnesota, we got you covered. You can register on game day, though you might be disappointed that that college kid didn't turn in the thing that you signed. In most of the rest of the other states where they don't have that, provisional balloting is a way to get around that. In other words, if you're in Ohio and that happens to you, you can't register same day. But what you can do is cast a provisional ballot, meaning it's provisional. You're signing it here, but you got to come back within a week to your county elections office and show that you are who you say you are and you live where you say you live and all the rest. So we don't need that in Minnesota because we got same-day voter registration.
Perfect. Thank you. Next question. Are there rules about helping people get to the polls? For example, providing a bus for a senior community to bring people to their polling place.
So for accessibility purposes, we don't care how you get to the polls. At least I believe we don't care how you get to the polls, as long as you get there. And so like in Detroit Lakes, a lot of times we'll have residential facilities or apartment complexes actually get buses, and you'll see groups of people coming in together. And so it doesn't matter how you get there, it just matters that you get there.
Thank you. Tanya, this question's for you, and it's your plug time.
Oh, goodness.
When is the next election judge training, and what is the training like?
Always looking for good.
So actually, we do have we brought along some forms for you today. One of them was from the Secretary of State's website on how to be an election judge. And also we have a little card out there that has a little QR code on it, actually. You can just click that and it'll take you to our election website for Becker County, and that is where we put all of our training schedules. We won't be doing any trainings until after June, and also we do take and hire about 10 election judges that are temporary in our office, and we will also have that application linked there for our website, on our website.
And if anybody has questions, they can visit with her after the fact, but those forms to fill out are on the back table. As you exit, you can grab them there. Next question. Some people are concerned about the post office no longer placing postmarks with a date on the mail-in ballots that could prevent their ballot from being counted. Please explain if this has any impact in Minnesota.
Well, fortunately, it will have minimal impact in Minnesota, because you may know that for a long, long, long time, our rule in Minnesota for those who vote by mail is your ballot has to arrive by election day. We are not one of the postmark states. There are about 13 states, including some really big ones, that are postmark states, where if you're voting by mail, as long as it's postmarked by election day, it can get in a week, 10 days, sometimes more, depending on the state. But we're not those kind of states. We're a get there by state. And so the postmark issue is kind of a side issue for us, as long as it gets to the people counting the votes by that date. So it shouldn't have an impact. But I do feel for those other states, because the Postal Service just announced that the day you drop it off is no longer necessarily the date it will be postmarked, which if you have any sort of postmark deadline in your life, voting or otherwise, we all got to pay attention to that. What they're basically saying is you might drop it off on Tuesday and we might not get around to postmarking it until Wednesday or Thursday. Well, that can have real consequences, right? For any postmark rule in life, voting or otherwise. Fortunately for voting in Minnesota, not an issue here.
And I would just like to add that we do have a pretty good communication with our local post office. They know that we have multiple mail ballot precincts within our county. So a week before, we usually reach out to them, they reach out to us, and they actually hold those ballots instead of sending them to the distribution centers. And so we get them much quicker. And also on election day, they do make about 3 stops to our office to drop off those ballots. And that goes to even our Monaga, Park Rapids area. And I guess that's I should have brought that up before. When we look at Becker County, our precincts, we might have the 47 precincts, but a lot of our precincts, in order one way to get to that polling location, it is at least an hour to go from the courthouse to that polling location if we need to take and drop off any supplies to them. And it's not just one, it's in all directions. So, and with that, in the eastern part of our county, they actually have a different distribution center than the ones on this side of the county. So thankfully, they all kind of work together and they hold those ballots, because we have quite a few mail ballots even in that area. So,
Thank you. What is the process to prevent someone from mailing in a ballot and then vote in person? How do you cross-check that?
Oh, well, I have something to add. So the day before the election, I go to the courthouse and I pick up what's called a roster book. And I have to have that roster book in my hands the night before till they're done calling me, because they're still looking at ballots. And so in real time, as they're opening envelopes, I'm putting information in that roster book that that person voted by mail. So that's a little bit of insight into the process on how we're just constantly getting communication from their office. But if you want to take over what happens then the next day.
Sure. So when we receive that ballot, it is marked and is marked as accepted ballot through our ballot board. Now remember, when we talk about absentee ballots and mail ballots, those ballots come into our office. We have to receive them the same day that we get them. And at that time, depending on which part we are at in the election process, either 5 days before the election or 3 days before the election, depending on the cycle, we have to have those ballots go through what's called a ballot board and have them accepted or rejected. Once they're accepted, that's how you will see that AB in the roster, marking that it was an absentee ballot that was accepted. And like she said, we're processing those ballots all the way up until election. I know this last election, it was all the way up until 8 o'clock. So for our office, that was kind of difficult, but we're calling those specific polling locations and having them mark AB in the roster, so.
And you guys do that on election day too, so a lot of times, like throughout the day, anytime they open up those mail-in ballots and they get marked accepted, we'll get calls. I know, like in the city of Detroit Lakes, we get, I think you call probably 3 or 4 times to like go over to your roster book and mark in there that so-and-so voted AB. So if they were to come in, their name would have a mark by it so that they couldn't vote again.
Yep, and we would not be able to process it if they had already been at that polling location and had signed that roster. We would not be able to, on our end, process it again.
Thank you. Who wants to explain what voter data rolls is and why it is important to keep that information local?
I think you want this one.
Yeah.
I mean, I totally would.
So, as you may have read or heard, starting last June, the Department of Justice reached out to most states, including Minnesota, asking us as Secretaries of State to produce to the Department of Justice all the confidential information that we possess about the millions of registered voters in Minnesota. I'm not just talking about name and address. That's a public list that campaigns and candidates order all the time with great frequency. What they want from us and the 41 other states, 42 total that they ask for this information from, is they want things like driver's license information, social security number information, very private, sensitive data on all of our voters. And we are among the 32 states out of the 42, so the vast majority, who said no. And the reason we said no has nothing to do with policy preferences or politics. It's our read, our interpretation of both state and federal laws. So our read of Minnesota law and federal law is that they are not entitled to get this sensitive data. They haven't told us, for example, why in particular they need this specific data to do what they say they want to do, and they haven't said what they're going to do with it once they get it. Are they going to share it with other agencies? If so, for what purpose, etc. So far, 4 states. Oh, and then, so out of the 32 out of the 42, like Minnesota, have said no. So we're not some island of defiance out there, right? We're in the vast majority of states, including so-called red states, so-called blue states, so-called purple states. So it's not a political thing. And the Justice Department has sued most of those states who have declined to produce the information, including Minnesota. So this is in active litigation. 4 of the states have successfully got judges to throw out those lawsuits. We have a hearing on our similar motion to throw it out on March 3rd. So we'll see what the court says. Obviously, we will always abide by what the justice system says. If they say our interpretation is just wrong, then of course we'll hand over the data. But we are confident in our legal position. And look, this is the kind of dispute that belongs in a court. There's nothing shameful or wrong about having litigation or a lawsuit. In a civilized country, that's exactly where we resolve these disputes. We don't fight in the streets. We go to a court of law. We have one interpretation of the law. They have another. And we're going to let judges decide that and do what they say. So that's our position on that right now, and it's before the court.
Thank you. What happens if there is drama? Who responds, and what are the charges if someone obstructs an election? And have you considered metal detectors at polling places as a safety protocol?
Ooh, I'm going to defer to my colleagues on that last piece, because that's a local decision. We can't tell a particular jurisdiction what to do in terms of security. But on the first part of it, I'll take a crack at that. We are actively gaming out those drama scenarios right now. I don't want to get too specific because I don't want to give a roadmap to the disruptors, right? But I will tell you that we are gaming those things out, as we do every election. This is no different. We have tabletop exercises, we have conferences, we meet with lawyers, both nationally and at the Attorney General's office, just to game out and think through potential scenarios. And it's only the limits of our imagination, and there may be scenarios we don't even think of. But when it comes to drama, whether it's a flood or a tornado or a bomb threat or a power outage or some sort of government interference, we're thinking those things through and planning the legal strategy, the sort of logistical strategy to try to ensure the no drama. That's the best I can tell you, but we are on it. We are thinking about it. We're trying to imagine what the scenarios would be. And like I said before, I feel good about the laws we have on the state and federal basis. We have laws that preclude voter intimidation. And that can take many forms, and we have really good remedies, I think, to get a court to stop that kind of stuff. So that's not to say that we will always think of every possible scenario, but we are definitely on it with partners both nationally and among the states and within Minnesota as well. But I'm curious about the metal detector question. Yeah.
So from the city side, it's not something that we've specifically addressed, but we have talked voter safety and the concern that comes with that. And I take very wholeheartedly the concern. That's something that, to me, voting is your right. And kind of like you said, I get kind of emotional about it because that's something to me that is very, very important. And making sure that you have accessibility to the polls, that you feel safe in the polls, that if you have language barriers, that we can assist with those things. That is your United States given right, is to be able to vote. And so that's part of our democracy, and that's something that I think as an election judge or an election administrator, that should be important. And so when it comes to safety and protocol for us in Detroit Lakes, it's me calling our police chief and making sure that he's aware, obviously, that it is election day, that all of his staff knows that it's election day. And we don't have them obviously posted up outside, but they're aware, so that as soon as, if they were to get a call or something was to happen, they know where we are. They know how to respond, and they can handle those situations quickly and effectively. And I think that's important. To me, doing things like metal detectors, sorry, my brain just lapsed. Putting up metal detectors, maybe that is an intimidation factor, right? Maybe some people are intimidated by that. Maybe that does scare them and doesn't want them to come to the polls because now they're even more concerned, or maybe they think they should be even more concerned. And so I want people to feel safe, and for that reason, we probably won't. It's also a cost factor. Those are expensive pieces of equipment, and when it comes to elections are expensive enough as it is. But just making sure, truly, please know that we do take wholeheartedly your safety and your safety concerns.
I just want to tell a story about Lake Eunice. So it involves safety and kind of this question, not metal detectors, but so about 6 years ago, a couple of the judges came up to me and they were kind of concerned. Some of it had to do with political climate. And we are a town hall in the middle of nowhere. We have one street light. Our parking lot is just very dark. Well, we don't even have a parking lot. We just got one, let's be honest. So this started with a concern with my judges. They really wanted to feel safe. And I had to really take a hard look at the political climate, the environment, the town hall, what I could offer to our community of people that come in to vote. I want them to feel safe, but I also want my judges to be safe too. My workaround was this. I'm lucky I have some road supervisors that are grown men who have a lot of orange. And I decided 6 years ago that I'm going to train them as election judges, and they are going to be my parking lot guys. Our town hall is so small, people don't even know where to park, first of all. So I have two of my election judges wearing bright orange with election judge badgery out in the parking lot, directing people, making them feel safe, smiling. Like I said, we know people, we know our neighbors. Hey, Heather, how are you? That's where you need to go. Here's the handicapped accessible door. So we're softening people as they come into the town hall and being accessible. That was a real game changer for me. I had so many people come and thank me. The other thing that this group of judges did in the parking lot was if someone was wearing a hat that was political, they could diffuse that in an area that wasn't 1,000 square feet, because that got very uncomfortable for me and for my judges. And everyone hears everything when you're in 1,000 square feet. So I just want to say we didn't add, metal detectors. What we did is we tried to use humanity to disarm what was going on. And I will stand by that with every election we have. I think it's important. And I just think that it lends itself to needing, more money, more people. This year in November, I already looked, the election falls on deer hunting.
That's right.
And so I'm having to take a look at what I'm going to do, because people have gotten accustomed to one of my election judges in the parking lot helping them find that parking spot when it's so full. I mean, we have cars just down the road and people walking, and they're walking by themselves. And we have judges out there with flashlights. Here, let me help you to this door. And so that's something we've done, and it's really brought a sense of community and humanity. And I think it's something we have to be honest with, that's maybe something we need to do.
And I know for the county level, I do reach out to our county sheriff's department. And we work with them quite frequently just to make sure that we're working with the emergency manager, the sheriff, the chief deputy, just so that they're aware of where our polling locations are. Just because on that Tuesday morning, do they know that there's a church being, so those kinds of items. And I think that helps out a lot, just to make sure everybody's aware where they're at, what time they're open, what time they're closing, etc.
Thank you. Thank you. We're down to the last two questions. What is the biggest election administration challenge Minnesota will face in the next 5 to 10 years in regards to technology, staffing, funding, or AI or something else? Anybody?
I'm going to say election judges. That's something that we struggle with now. I don't think that's going to change. 30,000 people, that's a lot. And it takes a community. It literally takes a village to run elections. And we need help. And so I don't think that's going to change. I really don't foresee that becoming an issue that just goes away.
And also another area that we have in our county is also the party affiliations that are tied to what the requirements are for election judges, and of the specific area of where that precinct is located. But definitely election judges, and like we say, we don't appoint election judges, but we'll train everyone. So don't forget to remember that come June.
Can I put in a quick plug on election judges? So in Minnesota, you can do that job as of the age of 16. Mm-hmm. So if you have teenagers in your life, spread the word. Mm-hmm. And remember, and those of you who know this, it's a paid gig. Mm-hmm. It's not a volunteer job. Under state law, they have to let you out of school. Under state law, they have to let you off of work. Have I mentioned it's paid?
Doesn't pay that great.
Well, I know. But for a 16 or 17-year-old, and by the way, there are very few geographic restrictions. For 16 and 17-year-olds who want to do this and to be a student election judge, it's kind of a weird thing in state law. They can do it in any community in their county or in adjacent county, like one that touches your county. I think it has to do with bedtimes on school nights, right? They don't want a kid doing this at 16 and driving 5 hours or something. If you're 18 and above, of course, there are no geographic restrictions. If you live in Detroit Lakes and you want to be an election judge in Bemidji or Duluth, knock yourself out if they'll have you, right? There's no geographic restriction. You don't have to do it in your community or your county or anything. So just spread the word that this is an opportunity for young folks, as young as 16, to do this paid job where they get to get out of school, right? It's just something to think about.
Final question. What do you think we can do to improve turnout for caucuses and primary voters, or votes?
Well, that's can be kind of political and it could be candidate-centered, but what I tell people a lot, you hear this from time to time, people who say, I'm just so unenthusiastic about our choices in the November general election. I mean, really? This is our choice? I can't believe this is the menu. To which I say, then you got to get involved in primaries, right? If you don't like what's on the menu, your opportunity is to get involved in caucuses and primaries, because that determines who the one Democrat or the one Republican or one Green Party is to run for every office, right? Only one of every party can be the nominee of that party for the office, but the nominees are chosen in primaries, and those are informed by, at least, the precinct caucuses. So to those who aren't crazy about what's on the menu, I say, get involved, vote in your primary. It's just as easy as the other elections. You can vote from home if you want. You can vote early absentee if you want. You can vote the traditional way if you want. But it really is the remedy for people who don't like what's on the menu in the November general election. So one way to spur turnout is just to remind people that that's the way to make sure the choices in November are what you want them to be.
Thank you. Before I turn this over to Secretary of State Simon for his closing remarks, I have a couple of things that I want to share with you. You notice Kevin has been kind enough to film this whole presentation, and he will have that turned over to Celeste, and we will have it posted on our YouTube site. And if you want to jot this down, Lakes Area League and, is it ampersand and? Friends. And then you can look that up on YouTube, and you would be able to get a recording of this, and you can share that information with other people that you know that weren't able to join us here tonight. And I want to say a quick thank you before I turn it over to you. Thank you, ladies, for joining us, and thank you, Steve, for being here, and thank you all for being here. But now I'm going to let Steve close us out.
First, I want to thank you all for being here. Second, I want to say what I said at the beginning is let's give a round of applause to the West Central Initiative Foundation and to the League of Women Voters for planning this event. League members, could you raise your hand? Wow, that's impressive. And I know Ben Shire from the foundation is here. I can't see where he is. Oh, there he is. No, where? Where is Ben? He was here. Okay, maybe he's just in the back somewhere. But thanks to him as well. I often say when it comes to the democracy business that I am an optimist about democracy in America and democracy in Minnesota. Despite the threats, despite the challenges, despite the swirl that we have to deal with when it comes to our voting and elections and our democracy, I think the roots are strong. Democracy has faced a lot in the last few years. Is it possible that in some ways democracy has been a little bit dinged and dented over the last few years? Sure, but never defeated, not even close. We've been through a lot worse as a country, and democracy has faced a lot of challenges elsewhere. But I hope tonight you leave, as I do, with a renewed sense of optimism. This is Minnesota. Voting is like a religion here, right? We vote in sky-high numbers because people have a fundamental confidence in the system. And we know that from polling results. The Star Tribune did a poll a couple of years ago, was the last one, that showed 79% of Minnesotans have a basic level of confidence in the election system. 79%. In this divided age, it is tough to get 79% of people in any place to agree on anything, right? And yet 79% express that confidence, and that shows up in that high level of turnout. And I don't think people would turn out in such sky-high numbers in Minnesota or anywhere else unless they thought and knew in their gut that the system was fundamentally honest and fundamentally fair. I'm not suggesting that everyone who votes agrees with all of our election laws or wouldn't, if they were king or queen for a day, add some or subtract some. Of course. So voting is not a sign that you agree with everything or everyone. But it is a sign when people vote in those high levels and in those high numbers that they do have a base level fundamental confidence in the honesty and integrity of the system. And that is due to a lot of factors. It's due to some good laws. It's due to some good pro-voting culture in Minnesota, but it is also and especially due, I will say again, to the unsung heroes who make those elections happen. Can we please get a special round of applause for these three? You know, I'm really serious about that. That's not just me somehow pandering here. I want you to know, and I say this to our staff all the time, you know, the media covers the plane crashes, not all the planes that land safely, right? And that's rational. I'm not knocking them. That's what they should do, right? So they cover the disasters, they cover the things that go wrong, but you're never going to see a glossy magazine spread talking about the hard, detail-oriented, grinding work that demands attention to detail that these three, among many other thousands in Minnesota, do. And as I said at the beginning, you can tell in how they talk about this. You can tell in how they talk about the importance of voting and democracy and how it means so much to them. You can tell that they put that into their work. You're not going to read about that in the New York Times, or maybe the Star Tribune, or some big cable special on it. But believe me, we have thousands of people like the three on this panel who care so much about this work, who care about applying the law fairly and evenly and in a way that makes sense for Minnesota. So I want to thank them, and I hope I sort of wish all Minnesotans can see what we just saw on this panel here, which is dedicated people at the local level which make this happen. They are our partners in our office, our teammates in our office, and I can't say enough about them. So thank you very much for coming here. 8 months till the next general election. We're going to deliver for Minnesotans, right, what we all know, what we want, and what we deserve, which is, again, high turnout, low drama. Let's do it. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Quick reminder, those election judge application forms are on that table on the outside of the doors. There's also some handouts from Steve's office that are on that table. You want to talk about signing up?
If you would like information from the Voter Outreach Division of the Office of Secretary of State, please sign the clipboard outside with your information. There's no government database, it's just one person, so.
Drive safe.
Been done like every level in the township, like